Mr. Maimane, as always, I thank you for your time.
Much appreciated, and it's good to be here with fellow South Africans.
Mr. Maimane, in 2014, the DA won itself north of 22%, just north of 22%, 22.2%.
Yeah.
What would growth look like coming into the 2019 elections? What is that magic number that the DA will be happy with?
No, look, we are an ambitious organization. The most crucial aspect is that we want to form a government in Gauteng, we want to form a government in the Northern Cape, and we've obviously got to increase support in the Western Cape, and then as common cause we're targeting 27%, we want to try and go for it. And I think that as a party, our fundamental offer is to say, can we work with all South Africans to achieve that dream?
But you're targeting Gauteng, you're targeting governing in Gauteng. That means scouring for 1 million more votes than you had in 2016. Where would these 1 million votes come from, considering the inroads that the EFF has made in the province?
No, these 1 million additional votes come from South Africans who share our vision. But remember, when people go to the polls, they need to be inspired by a vision for a Gauteng that they want to see. And I want a Gauteng where there's a job in every home. I want a Gauteng where black people, white people, colored people, and Indian people can work together. I want a Gauteng that is safe, where ultimately there's an honest and a professional police, where we can decentralize policing back into there. We want to make sure that Gautengers know that the DA will make sure that there's proper, effective delivery of basic service. So those 1 million additional votes have tasted DA government. They've seen what happens in Joburg. They've seen the fact that under Herman Mashaba, no money is stolen, title is actually delivered to people. Therefore, I think the long-term objective is about delivery.
Those million votes have also seen what's happened in the city of Tshwane, and a person who is now the DA's provincial candidate for premier, and they have heard about the Glad Africa irregularity contract, and they think that the DA is not the paragon of good governance that it pretends to be, that it also has faults, and that it deals selectively with things. One mayor, Patricia de Lille, compared to another, Solim Sima.
Well, I think it's a misreading of what actually took place.
But you understand the optics.
The fundamental issue here is that what did Solim Simanga do in Tshwane? Solim Simanga discovered there was a contract that was poorly adjudicated. No politician adjudicates a contract. Let's just be clear about that. That's DA policy. The chief accounting officer and the auditor general came back to us and said this contract was poorly adjudicated. Solim Simanga took action.
So see, the issue also had problems in his office with irregular appointments.
The issue here is that we run a DA government where we hold ourselves to high standards, and when we find something that's wrong, we deal with it. So where there were problems with appointments in Solim Simanga's office, those people were dismissed. That particular individual that you are talking about no longer works for the city of Tshwane. What voters are looking for is that voters recognize the fact that corruption is cancerous, is throughout the government. And what they want is a party that will say, when confronted with it, will take action.
But those are the they'll say the DA is not clean either. It's just the same as the ANC, and you know, potentially might migrate to something else.
You show me a DA leader who's been involved in Bosasa and any VBS scandal, and I will dismiss them tomorrow morning.
All right, Mr. Maimane, let's move the conversation a little bit to the economy here. Ultimately, South Africans are going to the poll hoping for a reversal of fortune in the current malaise they find themselves in. You have an economy that's barely growing. You're talking about having a job in every home. Surely that's more of a dream than it is something practicable, and is absolutely not enforceable.
No, it's very possible.
Private enterprise says that I might be more enterprising than somebody else. I might end up with 3 while the while my next door neighbor hardly has a job.
I'm asking for a minimum of 1 job in every home. 40% of our households in this country depend on remittances and welfare. So there's no single income that comes into a home. When you live in a house that hasn't got a single person working, it makes life profoundly difficult. Therefore, what we're simply saying is that in those 40% of the households, let's create an economy that is growing. Let's stimulate micro-enterprise. Let's identify key sectors like manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism, so that we can attract people to work.
Let's speak about
our issue is about getting people into jobs.
Let's speak about the growth of that economy. How is it fundamentally different from steps the ANC government is taking right now? I mean, I want to know this big leap from where we are in terms of economic activity to where we are going.
What's fundamental is that the state, here's the big difference, the ANC believes the state must be at the center of development. I think citizens and private citizens have an ability to create wealth. Therefore, if you have a state-led economic development, what you will end up doing is protecting SOEs, which bring fiscal constraint. You will end up in an environment where ultimately the state views itself as an employer. That's why we've ended up with a bloated state. We don't hold that. We're saying that actually build a lean and a capable state. The reduction of cabinet is the most immediate task if Mmusi Maimane became president of the republic. We make the cabinet smaller. Second to that, we give because you can do that, you can give the tax incentives so that in sectors like manufacturing, there's much better foreign direct investment.
We're already under collecting on tax. Where would you get the room to give the incentives?
You cut the state. You ensure that you run the state on 15 ministries so that you reduce that. You get rid of SOEs that are simply dysfunctional. Already now, we collect the tax so that we can give it to SAA, so the rich can fly and the poor will suffer.
Ultimately, when you look at South Africa's tax bracket, the biggest taxpayers are you and I, and then followed by companies. Surely you need to increase company participation in the South African economy. That will not be happening unless South Africa is viewed fundamentally as a different value proposition than it presents now. So fundamentally, I am saying that nothing is changing from the value proposition. So why would they come here?
No, what will change is the fact that we are going to pass a job act that allows for foreign direct investment to come in and repatriate capital when it needs to do so. So here's the fundamental issue here. If you don't believe the state must be at the center, I'm not saying the state doesn't have a role, I'm saying it mustn't be at the center, so that you can allow investment to come into the country with foreign direct investment so that you can increase the opportunities that people have. You can stimulate manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture, give policy certainty, and run a capable government that simply does not steal money from people. That's a value proposition. The issue here is that if we want our economy to grow, we need to change the government. That's the first step that we've got to do. We keep the same ANC, they are not going to reform. That's why they can't unbundle ESCOM.
I don't necessarily see the correlation between changing a government and growing the economy.
It changes the philosophy.
I get the fact that the philosophy and the outlook might change, but like I say, the value proposition of South Africa, it's very difficult trading here. It's very long haul for any large company looking for growth. We are tied in all kinds of labor issues that make it very difficult for employers from other states to actually come and capitalize here.
That's why the DA must come in, because let me show you just a practical example. When we come into government and we say we passed the Jobs Act, and then the second thing is that we exempt citizens from being able to opt in and out of certain labor laws. So on a basic fundamental, if a young person says, I want to go work, but I'm willing to opt out of minimum wage as a regulation, that's an attractive proposition for people to get young people into work. When you suddenly say to yourself, if you come to South Africa in the manufacturing sector, we will reduce your tax capability, that suddenly is attractive to investments. When you say you want a city-led economic development that will ensure that the lights stay on, because we will split ESCOM into two, one distribution, one build.
ESCOM is already being split into three. Aren't you
it's
a little
not being
behind?
done because the ANC will never get it done.
Well, the ANC talk about, and they delayed since, you know, the ISMO bill, and there has been very little implementation. But now we are surely seeing a progression towards that.
The ISMO bill was rejected. President Ramaphosa is not going to get that through his own party. He's not going to get it through. Already the unions are against it. Already his own party is against it.
Mr. Maimane?
My issue is this, and this is a very important one. If you want to stimulate economic growth in the energy sector, allow municipalities to purchase directly from independent power producers and allow much more aggressive investment in renewables.
Let me move on to coalitions here. The DA has had a history of coalitions in South Africa. There was a moment's marriage, if you will, with Ahang, and there was also the amalgamation of the Independent Democrats. Now you are a political bedfellows, you have a political arrangement with the EFF. How would you view that arrangement? Do you view it as a success? And why?
I think we're not in a coalition with the EFF.
I didn't say coalition.
Yeah, correct. So therefore, it's an important distinction because we are in a coalition with other parties. We are in a coalition with COPE, the ACDP, the Freedom Front Plus, and there's a formal agreement that's on the table. That's worked exceptionally well. Coalitions are a function of planning and policy. So when it comes to the EFF, we've never been able to deviate from our own principles. When the EFF said to us, we want to cut off the throat of whiteness, we stood strong. I
understand that. But the question is, do you view it as successful?
We've stood strong and governments are still standing. Yes, it is. Is Joburg still delivering services? It is.
So how much of the Joburg services, these achievements that we talk about in Joburg, do you accredit to your partner, the EFF.
We have to have worked hard, and I think that in a coalition government it's worked well. And therefore,
how much credit do they get for what's happened, for the services that you talk about in Johannesburg?
How do I adjudicate credit? We are at the forefront of leading a government. If this government was to fail, you talk about Glad Africa or something like that.
Why do you think this partnership did not work in the city of Tshwane?
It worked. Tshwane is still standing, the DA is still leading there, and we are delivering services to our people there.
Mr. Maimane, some say you're dog whistling to anti-immigration sentiments when you talk about securing borders. Do you feel that it's dangerous? Because on the one hand, the DA is concerned about race in South Africa, but on the other hand, it seems they're just happy to go along with anti-immigrant sentiments. And I say that on the basis of Herman Mashaba and some of the utterances he said about Africans coming to Johannesburg and how they bring diseases here.
Nobody can talk about anti-immigrants. That is a false analysis of what we're saying.
The general sense when someone is talking about securing borders is that you're talking about African immigrants, not necessarily immigrants from anywhere else. That's the general sense.
Let me get the facts so that we stop talking about perception. Here are the facts. No country anywhere in the world will allow you to go in and out without legal certainty. We've got to be able to have the appropriate documentation, which is what Herman Mashaba said. We want to adjudicate the status of all citizens and non-citizens so that we know that you've got an asylum status and a refugee status and a business visa so that we can adjudicate those. It is the future of all global economies. In fact, more than anything, what I want in the long run is make it easier for people who want to come in legally, give them the certainty, because then you can enhance the circular flow of immigration, and make it hard for people who want to come in illegally. Therefore, illegal immigration is at the center of what this issue is here. And to suggest that speaking about it is stoking up xenophobia can never be further from the truth. There was no political party speaking about it and xenophobia spiked. It's the silence of political leadership that forces citizens to say, well, our leaders aren't hearing us about this issue. We will take matters into our own hands. Give leadership and citizens will hear you.
Mr. Maimane, as you hit the campaign trail, I can only wish you well.
Thank you.
All the best and safe travels.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being with us on this edition of Political Capital. We continue to follow the Nigeria election story, and that should make part of Thursday's view into that election process. From us here, good evening and keep it right here.